First, as I usually will do, I will answer some questions about the previous Q shaft. Question number 1. Why does it appear that I am addressing the Q shafts only to people who are either in or familiar with the United States of America? Answer. This is done because the drifters mentioned that Dr. Z's Q shafts were addressed to a USA audience. Why that was, I am not sure. Question number 2. Why do you read from sheets of paper? Answer. I read from a prepared script to be sure to mention everything that is intended to be in a Q shaft. Also, I cannot exceed the time limit of a Q shaft, and a scripted message keeps me on time. I am not an actor, but a scientist. I am concerned with the data that is presented, not with how the data is presented. Question number 3. Who is Clint Westwood? Answer. Thanks to a couple of my assistants, I now know that Mr. Clint Eastwood was the inspiration for the drifters. I apologize for my error. In fact, my assistant owns a QV, which is a three-dimensional light storage array about the size of a sugar cube that contains all of Clint Eastwood's films. To acquire knowledge of the drifters, I watched High Plains Drifter, who is a man like me with no name. I will now address the method that's used to send these Q shafts. That is, how can I send an electronic message back in time? Let us consider the example of an apple that is struck by a bullet that is fired from a rifle. Pieces of the apple will be scattered when it is hit, but it will scatter at a relatively slow speed when compared to the speed of light. Next, imagine that a light beam tracks a portion of the apple from when it is struck to a position flying through the air. That light beam will send information back to a processing center, a PC, at the speed of light. The PC will, in turn, determine what forces are being applied to the apple piece at any given instant. Now, imagine an opposing force, a force determined by the PC, can be applied to the apple as it is flying through the air. This opposing force counteracts the bullet's force. Suppose that this opposing force is not a blunt force causing the apple to disintegrate, but a soothing force that keeps the apple in its present shape. Since the PC knows all forces that were applied to the apple piece during its flight, it knows what opposing forces to apply to the apple as it is forced backwards in its flight path. Now, apply this force to all the apple's pieces. When this is done, the apple will be reformed into its original shape, as if it was never blown apart by the bullet. You have to answer for yourself whether the apple has traveled back in time. Next, apply the same opposing force as was applied to the apple to all the matter in a sphere that is 10 feet in diameter with the apple at its center. Is all the matter in the sphere transferred back in time? Then keep expanding the diameter of the sphere. What happens? Of course, this is a very crude example, but one that is needed because the mathematics behind the quantum physics and quantum mechanics that allows this to happen is very difficult to translate into a relativistic or large world view, but it does work. What does this all imply? It means that I am able to change the condition of an electron to a pre-existing condition. If enough concentrated energy can be applied, I can change the condition of an electron to force it to exist how it did in the quote-unquote past. All this may make more sense when I describe to you the conditions of the grid, the building block of our universe. Your string theory has some similarities with the grid. This will be discussed in a later Q shaft. I must change the subject and include a warning before I stop. Soon a new lawlessness will evolve. It will be driven by a small block of people who have lost the means to financially support themselves and their families. They feel entitled to destroy those who have enriched themselves at the expense of the block's people. Where political assassinations were in vogue in the 20th century, pecuniary assassinations will become the rage in the early 21st century.